The U.S. is expanding its ongoing aid package to Ukraine with a fresh $3.75 billion aid package. This package includes brand new equipment that could indicate where the U.S. and its partners believe the war in Ukraine could be headed in the coming months. On that note about partners, there have been corresponding aid packages from other countries that we'll also dig into. First, let's talk about the U.S. package, which is $250 million away from being a $4 billion deal. The most notable inclusion in this package is the movement of 50 Bradley infantry fighting vehicles for Ukraine. Along with these vehicles, the U.S. will push 500 TOW anti-tank guided missiles and 250,000 rounds of 25mm autocannon ammunition, as well as training on how to operate and sustain these vehicles. Divided among the 50 Bradleys, each Bradley can be allotted 50 TOW ATGM rounds and 5,000 rounds of 25mm. I note that because there are a number of variables to bear in mind with the Bradley that are very important. First, it can be assumed that Ukraine will use the Bradley in frontline fighting, whether to stop any potential upcoming Russian offensive or to support Ukrainian offensives. That said, it may be a matter of weeks or even months before these vehicles are in significant use, as Ukraine will need to get crews trained up and integrated into units in a manner that they can operate and support one another effectively. Second, given the intensity of the fighting in areas like Crimea and Bakhmut and other parts of Ukraine throughout the war, Ukraine might actually need more ammunition for these vehicles before it's all said and done. This is mainly due to the rate of ammunition expenditure throughout the different battle areas. Third, the 50 Bradleys will be roughly enough to fill a Ukrainian tank battalion. No, Bradleys aren't tanks, and this is an educated guess based off of current Ukrainian tank battalion structure. So these Bradleys will most likely be spread across much more of the Ukrainian formation than just one single battalion. But I wanted to note that while 50 doesn't sound like a big number, it can actually be a big number if it's distributed effectively. The Bradleys can make a huge impact in helping Ukraine conduct offensives, as well as counteroffensive and even defensive operations. The 25mm autocannon is good at targeting personnel and even lightly armored vehicles, while its mounted TOW ATGM can handle all sorts of heavily armored vehicles. Again, no, it's not a tank, which some journalists have mistakenly identified it as one, and as others have griped about because Ukraine currently needs more tanks. In addition to the delivery of the Bradleys, the US is also sending 100 M113 APCs, 55 MRAPs, and 138 Humvees, all of which can enable greater mobility for the Ukrainian forces from the rear area to closer to the front line. I want to note that the M113 APCs are better as a lightly armored taxi for troops and are not exactly sufficient for direct engagement. So as far as this list for vehicles is concerned, the 50 Bradleys will have the most direct impact on the front line given effective employment. The US is also sending a number of indirect fires capabilities, including 18 155mm howitzers with their support vehicles, 70,000 rounds of 155mm ammunition, 500 155mm precision rounds, 1,200 rounds of 155mm remote anti-armor mines, which are 155mm shells loaded with anti-armor mines that allow Ukraine to mine areas that they can't effectively access from the ground. These are great for disrupting or denying access to areas like roads or spots that are heavily accessed by the enemy. In addition to the 155mm howitzers, Ukraine will receive a further 36 105mm towed howitzers with 95,000 rounds of 105mm, 10,000 rounds of 120mm mortar, which Ukraine currently operates the 120mm mortar system, so this is really just more ammunition for that platform, as well as additional ammunition for HIMARS, which wasn't exactly specified with a number. Finally, the US will send ammunition for anti-aircraft systems, anti-armor systems, as well as various small arms. In total, this US aid package is significant and can be enough to enable a number of options for the Ukrainian military once they've completed the necessary training and integration cycles for these systems. But even with all that, it's not all the aid being delivered to Ukraine as part of this package, it's just the US isn't. Germany is also sending 40 Marder IFVs, which are armed with 20mm autocannons and a Milan ATGM. They've also pledged to send one Patriot missile defense battery to Ukraine as well, which is also pretty significant as Ukraine's need for air defense is notable. This aid package altogether is massive, and all told it adds to a still growing nearly $25 billion in aid that just the US alone has sent to Ukraine. I've read many of the comments and shorts that I've made on this topic of military aid, and I want to make a note that seems very widely misunderstood. Some of that misunderstanding comes from the puzzling politicization of the conflict within the US, as well as deliberate misinformation and disinformation campaigns by Russia to cause confusion and anger at the levels of support. This aid is being being sent to and used by a country that is being illegally invaded by another country. In this case, Russia being the invader. There is no legal basis for the invasion. In fact, the United Nations has called for an end to the fighting, with the majority of the international community outright condemning the invasion. I know this will invite a number of comments from the pro-Russia side, which I've seen on a number of my other videos, but that's just the truth. Ukraine desperately needs this aid, and it really needs more aid in the future. There have been many calls to provide Ukraine with modern battle tanks like the Leopard 2, Challenger 2, or the Abrams. That said, none of these systems have been provided as of the time of this recording, though that's not to rule them out in the future. Ukraine has a long fight ahead, and if it is to remain a free country, let alone liberate the territories captured by Russia, it's going to need a significant amount of weapon systems, and a steady supply of ammunition that will be expensive, but not as expensive as the human lives being lost as the war drags on. Wherever you stand on the aid to Ukraine, surely we can all agree that the world is better off with Ukraine remaining an independent country and the war ending as soon as possible. While Russia is digging in for a longer fight, Ukraine needs to be equipped to stand firm, and this aid package does just that.